do weekly review, it's really valuable to do all the pieces as I was taught to do them, to get clear, to get current, to get creative. I learned it that way and I used it for years and it worked well. I always liked doing weekly review on a Friday. It enabled me to leave work at work, to relax and enjoy my weekend and not have work popping up into my head and not be worried about what was waiting for me on Monday morning, because during that weekly review, I would get ready for all the things coming up in the next week. One of the values of reviewing my calendar backward and forward was always that I felt so ready to go on Monday mornings. I kind of dreaded Monday mornings a little bit less because it made me feel good to be ready for the week ahead of time. The thing that evolved for me with weekly review that was kind of interesting was in that first part, getting clear, one of the components is to get things out of your head, externalize, as we call them, or do a mind sweep. And I would always grab a notepad and a pen and start to write down. Using the trigger list was very helpful and helped me to get things out of my head and onto paper so that I could clarify them and organize them into my system. And the professional and personal trigger lists were both valuable to me because I use GTD, both for my professional work and for my personal work. The thing I started to realize was my entire weekly review was kind of like a trigger list for me, because I would continue to think of additional things as I cleaned up my action list, as I reviewed my waiting fors. So I would continue to capture things outside my head while I did the other parts of weekly review. And then it occurred to me that third phase, which is called get creative, which David Allen teaches us you start to do as you get your head clear and empty, you have room for that creativity. I started realizing that creativity was already happening. It wasn't the third phase, it was all through weekly review, because all the dissociative thinking that happens as I do weekly review, all those things that show up in my head that I externalize and capture and collect, I realized part of that was creative. It was thinking of ideas and solutions and projects and actions that I wanted to do that were showing up as I worked through my weekly review. And that was creativity for me. I might have a meeting coming up the following week, and suddenly I thought of something I needed to add to the agenda. Or perhaps I reviewed a meeting that happened last week, and suddenly I remembered part of the conversation and some information that I could share with someone that they had asked about during that meeting. And that's creativity. That's thinking of additional value or solutions or ideas that might not have shown up otherwise. So I realized that I was being creative kind of through the whole weekly review as I kept capturing those things out of my head into my system. So I stopped thinking of weekly review as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and started recognizing that as long as you've got all the components, you're going to have a good weekly review. It's going to serve you and be valuable to you like it's meant to. But that creativity, that happens for me all through the weekly review. That externalizing happens all through the weekly review. And yes, I still have to wrap it up at the end and make sure that it's clarified and organized. But I don't try to pin myself into thinking of it as a phase that I finish before I move on to the next one. So that's what works for me in weekly review, and it helps me to recognize the value of it.